Hi, everybody, and welcome to Brilliant Lab's presentation, Teach It Through Code. My name is Sarah Ryan. I'm Program Director with Brilliant Labs. I've been in this position for over 6 years now, and we're really happy that you can join us today to discuss all of the fun ways that you can engage your students and youth with code in the curriculum.
And my name is Jeff Henniger. I'm a Halifax area teacher, and I'm currently working with Brilliant Labs and going into my second full year in this role. So excited to continue supporting teachers.
Absolutely. So for today's topics, like I mentioned, we'll be discussing what types of code there is and how you can infuse it into the curriculum. So we are going to start off with talking a little bit about who Brilliant Labs is and what we do, why coding is so important, and connecting it with curricular outcomes, examples of coding projects, and then we'll finish up with questions and discussion. So Brilliant Labs is a not-for-profit organization that focuses on hands-on maker-centered learning, including enhancing and supporting digital skills, as well as doing hands-on projects that are lower tech than that, and which could be, crafting, traditional crafting, sewing, knitting, and then we like to mix it up with things such as 3D design and printing, code, robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, pretty much anything that's hands-on. We like to connect students together to show what they're interested in and to engage them to develop these skills, but while doing so, to share and learn with their peers. Brilliant Labs is currently in all 4 Atlantic provinces. We have over 20 full-time employees on our team, as well as many that join us through the summer for our summer STEAM camps. And we work with schools all across the provinces from grades primary to 12. And we have many ways that we offer supports to teachers, which we're going to discuss today.
All right, so in today's session, we aren't doing any kind of step-by-step tutorial walkthrough. We have a ton of that stuff on our website, or like there's on our YouTube channel as well. There's all kinds of tutorials, regardless if you're looking for something with microbits or Scratch or MBlock. All these things we're going to just kind of briefly talk about today. But we have lots of those materials. So if you are interested in those, we are happy to help point you in those directions. So to get us started today, just to talk about this idea of how coding can create change. So as teachers, how can we support this idea of bringing coding in and letting it be a tool for students to learn with? And we think it's just that it's bringing it in and helping our students to be engaged and inspired by different problems and using code as a method of solving problems. So whether it's through hands-on or project-based or experimental learning, by allowing code to be a tool that our students can use, we think that we're really opening up a lot of doors for our students now and in their futures. Because there's so many ways that we can take this beyond just a computer screen as well. So using things that are very screen-based like Scratch are fantastic and awesome and very powerful. But there's also once kind of things get established, ways to take that code and that problem solving beyond the computer using things like robotics and microcomputers like the microbit or our Brilliant Labs B-board, or different ways of collecting data are all things that are very much tied to coding and really make some powerful learning experiences for our students. So in addition to that, coding really helps children become confident problem solvers. As they learn to code and give different directions, they're reinforcing that mindset that there's no one way to do things. So oftentimes I make a lot of little kind of coding challenge prompts. So again, we'll show you where you can find those later. But in those, I usually say, like, I'll challenge them to, is there another way that you could do this that's like a more efficient way or a different way that you could do this same code, just to kind of acknowledge that the way that I'm showing how to do something isn't necessarily the best or the right way. Because just like in writing, you can have a writer's voice. Oh, sorry, we're getting a lot of background noise. I'm not sure if it's anything on your end there, Sarah.
I can't hear anything on my end.
Okay.
Is that better?
Possibly.
I didn't do anything.
Okay.
I don't hear anything.
Okay, it's pretty quiet at my house. I don't hear the pets yet, so
Yeah,
let us know if it continues, Megan. Thank you. Um, I lost my train of thought there. Where was I?
it's okay.
Oh yeah, just the idea of connecting the idea of writing to coding. So just like in writing, there's different ways that writers craft things. So the way that I write something might sound different than the way that Sarah would write something. Um, and the coding is the same. So you can find different paths to a proper code, I guess. So there's many ways that students can learn that idea of, people do things differently, and it applies also in code. Sarah, I think I figured it
Yeah.
out. I think it's that your microphone might be a little bit too close to your face. I think we're just hearing you breathing a bit.
Okay, is that better? I think I can take my headset off.
All right, you're up there, Sarah.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the most important messages for us to touch on is that students really need to be truly involved with their education to feel like they have ownership over the future. It really helps to ask, what do we want versus what do students or what do youth want? And more importantly, what are they interested in? Educators who guide and parents who are engaged and involved and help support innovative projects, whether we have it started in the classroom, we take it outside of the classroom, take it home, and the engagement at home continues because young people are natural coders. They love to problem solve. And no matter which platform we're working on, we often hear, wow, is this free, or can I access this at home? Or if they have if they don't have access to the internet or a device, they can always go to a library after school hours. But we can really see the momentum that's being driven through just a simple process of that introduction to code, and starting off at the basic level with block-based coding platforms such as Scratch or Blockly. So we find that students who do continue the education outside of the classroom helps them as they grow and build in those skills to kind of redefine what they feel is success, and how that they can actually link code to things that they do every day, and including looking ahead into their future careers. So why is code so important? I'm asked that quite often by adults who haven't had a lot of experience but are genuinely interested in how it can correlate to life other than just sitting there and staring at a screen. And the answer is there's many answers that you're going to discuss, but number one, it helps improve computational thinking. So that's logical reasoning, critical thinking, pattern recognition, decomposing problems, debugging, and it addresses learning attitudes. It also helps with collaboration, with tolerance and persistence. So when you're doing something, for example, with the hour of code or Scratch, and you try to run your program and a student finds that they're having difficulty, then they often lean on each other to look and see, because we learn at different levels and different interests. So one person's project may be very different than the others, but it still has that different elements of the same code infused in there so that they can help each other. And youth end up developing a set of skills that will be useful to them in the future, such as their hobbies, post-secondary, and even, like I mentioned, in their careers. So one really main thing about why it's important is the collaborative aspect of it. So it really builds the relationships between peers, which is important because as we go through school, we're often met with the same people, our same cohort, and being able to come together and problem solve really builds on those social and emotional skills. We often step back when we're teaching and hear kids asking each other how they found the answer, or what they could do to add like a really neat feature if they're building a Scratch project, how they could make a game like that, or add an element that they admire from one of their peers into what they're doing. It's also flexible, so it's really important because it's a language, just like knowing a second language, but it's flexible, so it's not one size fits all. So that even if one class or group is working on the same platform, everybody's going to be doing it at a level that suits them, and it's not. Usually there's enough support that the student doesn't feel like they're left behind or jumping ahead. We do have a lot of keeners out there who jump ahead and um, and love to do that too. But they're often the ones who have really taken ownership, but they want to pass that knowledge on and support their peers. And last but not least, certainly, it's fun. It's making, it's playing, it's creating games. So the student is no longer just the user of technology, but they're creating something, and that directly aligns with a maker-centered education.
Yes. We had a comment there, Sarah, in the chat that was very fitting to what you were saying. Anne LeBlanc said that I find coding helps with resistance, and I like to have students think about debugging, writing, and math as well. Often students who don't shine somewhere else shine in coding. That reminds me of, I love that idea of, thinking about debugging as something that we do in other subjects as well. I remember at one point I used the analogy of like, you might debug your dinner by adding ketchup. Like it's like thinking about something that it needs and making a change. And so we can debug all kinds of things other than our code. So that common language is interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, so another thing we're going to mention there is that with a estimated 50 billion connected devices, and we're talking about whether that's within the school, office, or the Internet of Things, um, by 2021, and that's essentially where we are. So we have billion-dollar companies and industries who are making things such as like smart TVs and at-home appliances, including drones. So, I guess like 5 years ago, it wouldn't be as common to see somebody with a 3D printer or a drone in their home, or even robotics. So it's becoming more and more a part of play and fun within the family. So it is a way to bring the different levels and ages together, generational wise. But we're also seeing that cultural shift that takes place where the youth who, as I mentioned, they like to consume technology, they're transitioning into a world where they're learning to create with technology. And that's a world that's very different than the one that I grew up in, and I imagine a lot of us adults did. So there's been the world that we're in now that our youth are working in, working towards for their own careers is very, very different than it was for us, or even like 5 to 10 years ago. It's rapidly changing. So, and I mentioned before that with so many different languages and platforms out there, and a lot of them are open source, there's there's a lot of opportunities for people who have different interests to participate. So for example, I was really into, and I still am into, fashion design. So once I found the wonderful world of wearables, I was able to find a way that really motivated me to continue with my own void of coding, not and take that outside of my career and do things and make things and really show it off. So it's not learning because I had to, it's learning because I love to. And it really, coding fosters this attitude that really promotes lifelong learning. Are we still having any audio issues on my end?
It sounds okay to me, but people can let us know in the chat if it continues. But,
That's right, Andrew. They need to be creators of code.
yeah, about being creators. That's
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
exactly what we're saying. To kind of carry on that idea as well. So we actually discussed the UN's Sustainable Development Goals in our session yesterday. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more there, check out our session recording about maker education. But if you're unfamiliar with the SDGs, basically the story goes that in, I believe it was 2015, the United Nations started this talk of making big sweeping changes for these things that are happening all over the world that we really need to correct before climate change makes it irreversible. So they came up with these 17 goals and the lofty goal of having these things accomplished by the year 2030. So here we are in 2021. We are 9 years away, and the goals are more well known than they've ever been, but they are also still all important things that we need to be working on. And we feel at Brilliant Labs that these SDGs are a really powerful lens to frame education around. So they, because they're so problem focused, we love the idea of students finding problems and then trying to find creative ways to solve them. We don't just have to sit back and wait for other people to solve the problems. We can try and think about and learn about these issues and find creative problems to solve them through using things in our curriculum and tools like things that we have in our schools, as well as code. So there's a lot of really cool things that we see and we support teachers doing, where they are trying to use code to solve problems using things like simple tools like microbits, which are pretty accessible, or even I mentioned data collection earlier. So learning more about their environments and finding out how things are working by using code helps them discover those problems so that they can try and find creative ways to solve them. So this leads into this idea of using coding as an agent for change. So students don't need to just be that consumer, like Sarah was saying. They can create things that make life better or safer for others, including individual level, but also in terms of their community or on the wider scale, of the world. So that was harder in the past, but now with technology and with coding, these things are really accessible to us and our students, and we can make learning not something that we need to do or that they just have to get through in school. Learning can be a really powerful and impactful thing that they get to do, and they get to be this active member of. And we're not saying that there's a level where you kind of need to be learning code, but then you can also use code to learn, or you can apply code to solve these bigger problems beyond just creating or learning how to use the coding blocks. Like, it goes so much further when you give the students the opportunity to do so.
So yes, thanks, Jeff. That's absolutely right. So more than it's hard to believe, but more than 65% of the young people will be working in jobs that do not currently exist, or at least if they do exist, they're going to be highly adapted from what they do. So where we do see the infusion of technology more and more every day, learning these computer science skills, such as coding, but also working with microcontrollers and robotics, and also learning more than one platform. So starting off with the block-based code such as Scratch, Blockly, Hour of Code, and then moving forward with JavaScript, Python, even as they progress into things like C++. Not one of the easiest ones to do, but when we foster these skills at an early age, they really, like, for a student's mind, it's so malleable that making that jump from doing block-based coding to like linear, or actually writing out things such as JavaScript. One of the great things with using the microbit, as well as we'll talk about, but Brilliant Labs' own IDE, is that you could have the capability of doing both types, so that you can also switch back and forth between tabs to see what it looks like when you're doing something drag and drop. I always encourage students to flip over to JavaScript and see what that would look like, so that from early on, they're really getting an idea. Even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, it rings a bell as they get older and they're ready to transition to the more difficult levels of code. Excuse me. So engaging youth with where they are, as in what they're doing at that age level and what they're passionate about, really helps direct towards how they can infuse that into what they're doing in their coding projects. I did mention wearables. For example, I had a student who really did not care for building Scratch games. They were more hands-on. They really wanted to make, I believe it was like it wasn't a high school student, but they were making something to do with fashion. I believe it was a hat, and they were knitting a hat, but they didn't want to do the code. And I had mentioned, well, you know what? You can actually do something with I think it was a Adafruit Circuit Playground Express, where they could add it to their hat and then code it to light up different colors. They can add sensors. And they were totally unaware that when they saw other pieces of fashion out there, and they mentioned like light up clothing and stuff. And when I had made that connection with that there is code involved, that instantly sparked this interest and this engagement to go back and get the basics with Scratch, and then look at the platforms that we use to do the code with the microcontrollers. when we're talking about code and careers, so that's a good example of how she said, she goes, I never thought that I could use code for something that I like, and I really want to grow up and be a fashion designer. And I said, well, that's great, and you're going to be able to bring something really cool to the table that not necessarily everybody does, although we are seeing more and more wearable aspects to fashion. I do like to talk about success because as adults, we often correlate success with perhaps monetary gain, and sometimes material things. I mean, to ask each person what success is to them, you'll always get a different answer. When the kids are younger, they, for some reason, tend to equate that when they hear it. But when we do talk to youth, we often, some will say, you know, it's monetary. I was being comfortable, it's having a Ferrari or that sort of thing. But more often than not, it's about doing something that they love every day, or doing a career that helps people. Because there's that, you know, we're all born, I believe, as empathetic creatures, and children are especially. They learn what they're taught, and if we can show them that it's possible to go through school and to find something that you love doing rather than something that you think is going to make you a lot of money, that's a really great mindset to do. And code really opens up that world of possibilities. And by, as educators and parents and members of the community, fostering these existing skills and combining them with the new skills that we're describing with code, really sets them up to be prepared to do so. And sometimes, like I mentioned, we'll take a topic or an outcome that people wouldn't naturally or usually correlate with computer science, such as things within phys ed, or I mentioned fashion design, art, and show the connection. That's what really piques the interest to to still follow what they love, and see how code could fit into that as being useful as a tool, but not being the be all and end all. So code in our environment, which is really great because this links back again to the United Nations SDGs. I always love the quote that Jane Goodall says. She said, knowledge leads to action. Absolutely. So as a little kid, you want to do everything. You think you can achieve anything, and it's really excellent to plant the seeds to be able to do code, because code really involves a lot of problem solving, critical thinking, troubleshooting, as we know, just by trying to set up things. Virtual calls the past year and a half has engaged a lot of adults who were not necessarily as familiar with using these platforms, not necessarily code, but being able to be technically inclined and have the digital skills to communicate. That's where we've had a lot of people have a strong learning curve. So while doing so, we want to make sure that we're really conscientious of how that is impacting our environment at home, our environment at school, and our environment in our community and the world in general. So there's a lot of ways that technology is being used now, so that we can solve problems, as Jeff mentioned, with the United Nations SDGs, looking at ways to work with renewable energy, and really engaging students to see the things around them and look at the SDGs and say, what are some of these problems that really stand out to you? What do you feel passionate about? Maybe it's the no poverty, or maybe it's fresh water, drinking water for all. But in doing so and getting that conversation going about the environment and cueing the social empathy points that they would like to solve, then we're looking towards changing something further than our own world. So it becomes a micro into a macro situation where we're able to really problem solve and put the ownership in the hands of the youth to feel like they are doing something. They're not just making a game, which is really fun, but what can you do with that game to spread awareness about the environment, or how we can help people who maybe are less fortunate, or help ourselves. Jeff, I don't.
That's my fault. I did that myself on mute. Sorry, team.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure it was me. Okay, no problem. You start over. Okay.
Maybe look over to see the light was off.
Okay.
Thank you. So I was just saying, we are just going to take a few minutes to look at some of the different options for the types of coding platforms that can be used. So the one that people are probably most familiar with is the block-based coding. So MIT's Scratch website is probably one of my favorites for block coding. It's a ton of fun. There's all kinds of things that that students can do and create with that. Like Sarah's mentioned, that it's really fun to make games with. So kids can code their own video games. Also, kind of fun to think about with that gaming, that students can take a game that they really like, and they can try and recreate it and customize it in Scratch. So it's a pretty fun way to kind of personalize and find their own unique spin on things in there. Scratch is also a really cool tool for making animations, um, for storytelling, for making public service announcements as well. So they can make and create these really engaging projects that they can share out with the world after to share their messages and things that they've learned. Very similar, the Microsoft MakeCode is the one that works with the microbit specifically. So if you do not have microbits, there is a built-in like a simulator. So there's this digital version of the microbit there. So even if you don't have the physical ones, you can still do some really powerful projects with it. Um, if the microbit sounds like it's something that might be interesting to you and you want to learn more about, just get in touch with us, and we would love to try and support your classroom. Sorry, I don't know if you could hear my dog right beside me. I might have to make her stop soon. And Microsoft MakeCode has some other fun ones too. They have something called the MakeCode Arcade. So you can design their own video games using block-based coding on that website. At the middle school level here in Nova Scotia, every middle school was sent a kit of Cody Rocky. So it's just this robot on the bottom right. So hopefully those look familiar to middle school teachers, but they have their own platform for coding their robot called MBlock. So it works on tablets and it works on Chromebooks or any Windows or Mac computer. It works very similar to some of the other platforms like Scratch. But there are some really cool and powerful things that this program can do, whether you have a Cody Rocky robot or not. It has some really neat things around artificial intelligence, around machine learning that are built in there for the students to explore and to try and apply to solving some of these problems. So something definitely worth checking out and exploring. Like, for example, this code that's on the screen right now, it's coded that by using your computer's camera, it can guess how old you are. It can make like a very accurate prediction about how old somebody is just by using like the facial recognition that it has built into its software. It's really cool.
It was really kind to me. It put me at about 12 years younger than I was, but maybe it just needed to learn a little bit more from.
Right.
But it's also neat because you can also do the machine learning with facial expressions. Um, and that's one way that you would do training with the MakeLoad. But as Jeff mentioned, it's such a great platform, Microbit and the MBlock MakeBlock, because students are able to take that out of the classroom, even if they can't take the robot home or the microcontroller home. They have that ability to replicate and work on that project, should they choose to, and then save it. It saves automatically, usually because it's web-based platform, and then go back to school and continue on with a physical piece of hardware. So we're big fans.
And as Sarah mentioned earlier, getting into the more text-based coding. So this would be something that that as students become really familiar with block-based, they might be feeling ready in some situations to move up to this text-based, or some of our high school students in courses are definitely doing some text-based coding. And there's a lot of platforms that support this. Here in Nova Scotia, the Department of Ed has right now we can get CoSpaces EDU to our students. So they have options for block-based, but they also have this built-in JavaScript editor. So students can be creating three-dimensional worlds that have interactions coded. So like if a certain character walks over to this character, then this should happen. So all these things can be happening for game design and here for storytelling, for sharing learning. And students can get into and start to make that step into text-based coding with a program like this. Same as well with make code, because you can switch between the blocks and the JavaScript. It makes it a nice, like a gateway into that text-based coding for our students.
It's really neat. Jeff, if I could just touch upon it. I had a camp session the other day where there was this one young lady who was so into it and was like, I think we were doing something with the microbit. I think we were maybe doing rock, paper, scissors. And she had already jumped ahead and completed all of the steps that we were using conditionals. Statements, but then she flipped over to JavaScript and started editing all of that she did in JavaScript to just, and I thought, I mean, and then she was just so excited about it that it was just like the amount of passion coming from a 9-year-old. It's nice to see grade 5, 6, even I had one class in AVRCE who were grade 3, 4, and they wanted to jump right into JavaScript. So that's we instead of they had some experience with the block-based coding, but we went right into JavaScript with the microbits, and there were a few that needed a little extra help, but that's where that peer support came in.
I was just looking back in the chat. Andrew was asking if there's any kind of like official text-based language that we're promoting in junior high schools here in Nova Scotia, and I don't know the answer to that one right off. Do you, Sarah? Have you heard if there's any that's being promoted more than others?
I believe that Python was one that we were going to be, or there was discussions that was being promoted. I mean, and there's a lot of really great resources. If you go through the Hour of Code or code.org website itself, it'll direct you to open source resources that I was learning Python prior to the summer break, so yeah, I would say Python. It's very similar to JavaScript. Of course, there's some differences, but then you also have like HTML and JavaScript, which are both great for if you wanted to code your own blog website or something like that.
HTML reminds me, it seems like it happens every year. There's always a couple students that discover in Chrome that they can view the source code. So they'll be like on a website and they'll be thrilled that they can find the spot in the code where they can change the number and make the background change. Or if they were playing a game, they can use the source code to make the display show that their score is actually way higher than it is. So it's kind of neat to see kids tinker and explore that text code, even at where I was teaching in grade 5. So with younger students, it's kind of cool.
I always, when I accidentally, before I was into code and computer science, when I accidentally clicked something, all of a sudden I would get this box pop up on the right side of my screen. And I'm like, oh, well, what is this? Now, at that time, I unfortunately had very little computer science through my education days. So I did most of my learning myself over the past, 7 or 8 years. And I took one course in university, which was not super exciting. It was, where I was going into university was absolutely almost zero experience. It would turn out to be a course on C++, which is quite a powerful, big language to jump into. And I know that if I had, I don't think Scratch, I'm dating myself here, but this would have been about 2008. If it was around, it certainly wasn't something I knew about, and it would have really helped me a lot to have had that foundation in place before I jumped right into C++. Needless to say, I would say my marks would have been better now and especially if I gone through that process, but we had to handwrite our exams with paper and pencil. So for some reason, I'm not sure, I've talked to a lot of other adults who did computer science, and they mentioned writing their exams, writing their code with pencil and paper, and that sometimes works for students in small activities to make it fun. I've done that too, just to remember, you've got all of the different aspects that are super important, like ampersands, and where if you put the hashtag or the number sign in the wrong place or whatever, how it just really throws things off. So that's one activity to take it from like analog to digital in a way. Handwriting code is fun. I'm glad you think so, Andrew. We should have a chat with back and forth, or take pictures of our handwritten code, and I'm sure that you can. Mine's not so great. I'm much better on the computer now, but you're right. You can make these things fun, and they're all part of learning, as long as you make it fun and not confusing. I was very confused when I took the C++ course, but again, that really relied on my lack of experience or lack of exposure to code at the time.
I was just looking in our participants list and recognized a few names as early elementary teachers. So I just thought I would mention as well some tools that I didn't mention earlier. So for the littles, I know that coding is still a part of the curriculum there as well. So some things that we would recommend for very early on skills would be to do offline coding activities. So that's not even using a device. It's more about teaching kids that those computational thinking skills. And I know one of another participant here, Anne LeBlanc, had a session all about computational thinking. So check hers out as well for more on that. But yeah, just that getting students to think like a computer can be a great first step. There's also a really great program called Scratch Junior. So it's all the things that I love about Scratch, but there's no writing on the website. So everything is pictorial. So it has a really low floor, high ceiling to it, because students don't need to be able to read at all to be able to code some really cool projects. So it has a lot of the same functions, but everything is like drag and drop blocks, and everything has its own little icons, so they can learn what block does what, and create some really cool ways to share what they've learned or to tell stories. Even I've worked with classes in primary using Scratch Junior on iPads or on Chromebooks. So definitely worth checking out as well for our early elementary teachers that are here with us.
It's really fun. The littles love doing it. And then when we progress into the Bbot, so you're doing the offline coding with pen and paper, or even with little cards. But then if they move towards something like the Bbot or the Mousebot, then they're able to take it to the next step. And then they're ready to progress into something like regular level Scratch. But or the I like the code.org website has some really good, simple, they're things that are more directional with arrows rather than line-based coding. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the Brilliant Labs B-board, which is what we like to call the superhero cape for the microbit. It's something that we have been designing for the past 4 years. We've had a couple of versions come out, and they're designed to essentially take the microbit beyond what we are doing with just the regular microbit. So it has an open source IDE, so it's a web-based platform that's specifically developed to work with the components that we have with the B-board. So we have things called clickboards. I think that there's over 40 different types of clickboards, depending on what project you're doing. There's like temperature logs, there's motors. You can build a cool rover. Jeff, I believe that you made a rover with one, or you could build something that would help you with like a greenhouse, so a watering system. You can use it to study climate change, weather. So the B-board, like I said, really takes things further. It's built, we created to help innovate these projects, so to take in more from the screen, and in partnership with the microbit, come together and really open it up for larger projects once you get that kind of foundation down. So its ID is very similar to the Make Code ID that you use online. That's, like I said, it's open source. We also have code sharing with GitHub, and it's customizable, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of different pieces that you can request. So we do support the B-board with our project funding for teachers. So if you had a project in mind, then we could discuss which of the clickboards or the additional components that would go with the B-board and the microbit, which ones would work best, or even sometimes get a bunch together, and then depending on what you're looking to do, have groups look at what the options are, and then kind of, I'm not going to say reverse engineer things, but plan for something without knowing what is there to begin with. Or they might ask for something that we don't have, but then they would troubleshoot a way to, like, for example, we don't currently have an oxygen sensor on the for the B-board, but it's something that there is code that can be manipulated to use with another clipboard so that it will work. So it is block-based, and you can also use JavaScript, just like the Make Code platform. So when we went into discussion to design this 4 years ago, we really wanted to make sure that it would be accessible for students and youth of all ages, so that they can do the ideation, the design, the creation. And you don't have to be super tech inclined, because where you can use block-based coding with it. I mean, and then you can also have the older students mentor or work with younger students to get that intro again. So really combining the hands-on element of code along with what they're practicing on their devices is a great way to spark that imagination, the creativity. So we also have, as we're always trying to think about how we can change the world around us and how we can improve it, within the design of the B board, we've really kept in mind what are the things that we could be used to help to work towards the United Nations SDGs. And in doing so, that's how we decided to develop the clipboard accessories that we have. And then we have a series of challenges that we put out throughout the school year, innovation challenges, such as the Mars rover one that Jeff, you participated in, or the Community of a Future, which is designing a community that has sustainable aspects to it and using the B board to and the microbit as the controller for that. Okay, so now we'll chat a little bit about how Brilliant Labs can support teachers. So, of course, we have talked about how we can support through. So I don't know if we mentioned we offer virtual sessions and in-class sessions for those of you who don't know that.
Coming up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's known now. But within the province of Nova Scotia, the Department of Education and the Centers for Education have rolled out a lot of equipment that's readily available and in the classroom. So depending on what grade levels, there's everything from B-bots, the Spheros, Ozobots, and then we have there's higher levels. So we also have the Lego EV3 kits for the students who may be interested in joining, creating a robotics team, and then also ROV robotics. So there's a lot of things and a ton of microbits. There's a lot of microbits already in the school. So by working with what's currently out there with that resources that you have in your school, and then requesting anything additional from Brilliant Labs, you can really take what you have and put it to great use, but also open up the possibility to have that foundation of items and then say, well, you know what, I have these spheros, but I really want to do this activity, like maybe do a chariot or a maze or whatnot. And then we can come in and help provide the additional components that you wouldn't necessarily have for the project in your classroom. We mentioned the different languages that we don't really promote them. We're willing to work with any language that a teacher is interested in or students are interested in. And I think that's all I wanted to say about that. The other supports that we have are our monthly. Jeff, I'll let you talk about the monthly coding challenge because
Yeah,
you really led the charge on that one.
Oh,
It
thank
was
you.
really exciting this year.
Yeah, so we wanted to provide teachers and students with just some prompts for ideas of ways to use coding. So every month throughout the last school year, we put out 4 challenges a month. So they were put out as being intended for certain grades, but they certainly were not limited to those. So it was really depending on what the students' needs were for coding. You could kind of pick which one was a good fit, or maybe one of them really matched well with what you were doing in the class. You could pick from any one of those 4 challenges. And they're just really short videos. Most of them are under 5 minutes or even less. Some of them got even shorter, down to 1 minute. And they were just a prompt. So it was just something that you could, a problem you could try and solve by using code. So some of them were really hands-on or used different robotic things or microcomputers that are in the school. And others were just focused on something you could do on a computer, like using CodeSpaces or Scratch. We also had a lot of unplugged or like offline coding activities. Most of the months there was at least one that was you didn't need a computer at all to do it. It was just building those computational thinking skills. And those challenges remain available. They're on our YouTube channel and also on the link that's on your screen there. And you can use those with whole class or small groups, or even just for individual for challenges, whatever your needs are. We're hoping that you can make use of those challenges in the future as well. And just to kind of make sure we cover our bases, we just wanted to share with you the rest of our resources and ways that we can support teachers. So in anything that we've talked about today, or any of your ideas that you think sound awesome, and if you just want to bounce ideas off of us, or hear what we've seen done in other places, we do offer any kind of consultation that you want, whether it's just a phone call or a couple emails, whatever you need. Basically, we are here to support you with. We have equipment that we can lend out. Sarah also mentioned our funding grants, so we can help you get the materials that you need that you get to keep and use year to year. We do school or individual PD for teachers. We can come in virtually, as it is now, virtually, and lead coding sessions, or for any kind of project that you're doing, we can kind of do that modeled lesson for you virtually. Or if you just want to have somebody there as backup, you can be the teacher leading the session, and one of us can be on virtual standby, ready to support you and your students in any way you need. So whatever you need to feel comfortable, that is what we offer and support you with. Or maybe you just aren't sure how to assess a coding project. We would love to sit down and help you develop an assessment tool that could be used to assess that project that you're doing.
Absolutely. There's many ways that we can work together and figure out what the best level of support is for you and your students. So, which is talking about projects and support, we are really happy to have created a database of it'll be over 250 projects from across Atlantic Canada at many grade levels that have been completed by teachers, by staff, a Brilliant Lab staff team during summer camps. Um, and there, like I mentioned, there's something there for all grade levels, and you're able to filter it. And it's also soon going to be open for teachers and students to be able to submit their projects, and then it'll be under review and then shared on this amazing database that is available to anybody, open source, to go in and take a look and say, so if you're a little lost on inspiration on what you would like to do, then having a look at what other people have done at your grade level or within that subject matter, then it's a great way to inspire. And you don't have to replicate the exact same project. You can go ahead and take it and do a different spin. And then based on what you currently have for materials, reach out to us to see how we can support you with materials or with that virtual class support or consultation.
Nice. Also, within the projects that are there, you can filter by a topic that you teach, or you can even filter the projects on there by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So you can find things or activities that you could do, whether it's coding or offline, things that you could do connected to the different SDGs that you might be discussing with your class.
So yeah, so we have we've mentioned several times because we're really happy to have.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to be able to support and have the ability, because we know that how much teachers and educators have on the go, and that resources are sometimes a little bit tricky, or specific ones, to be able to support with our project funding grants. So they're usually up to $500, and we always try to work towards a yes to approve it. We don't usually say no unless the request is for like a bunch of iPads, because that's something that would go through another avenue to get. But we certainly also have equipment out for loan too. But we love to see, this is how we actually develop and add to our project database, is through the support. So if you're looking to do a project, as we mentioned, and you want to take a look at our database, or if you want to talk to one of us, then we can see what you need and then support you with our funding application. The funding application is live and available on the website. I think it might be closed now until the end of August, just for the school year. And then it'll be reopen again, and you can go in and you can take a look. It's a really pretty easy way to apply. There's a form. It's pretty straightforward. But should you have need any help filling that out, then we're always happy to help. And if you fill something out, we receive it, and we have questions, or we feel like it's missing some information, then we're really happy to work with you either by phone or email to make sure that you get what you need for you and your students, and that you'll be able to complete the project, because we love to see the projects come to completion and add to that database.
Yeah, I know, speaking as a classroom teacher, oftentimes if I would have an idea or something, the first thought that would shut down a creative or something brand new would be, but I need this, which costs money, and I don't have money. Brilliant Labs really does kind of take that barrier away, because through this funding grant, it becomes, and we're usually pretty quick, I think I can say, Sarah, in
We
getting
are
this
very
turned
quick.
around to get people the materials that they need. So, if you have an innovative idea, don't let the lack of materials hold you back. Get in touch with us, and we really want to to take away that barrier for you?
Jeff, before Jeff started working with Brilliant Labs and you were teaching, you had quite a few very successful applications because they were so great. And you said you've always had you wanted to, a lot of your applications said, I really wanted to do this for a while. But like you said, this barrier was the cost or be able, to even being able to source some of the things because we do so much ordering that we're able to get, better prices in bulk so that you can have more equipment for student groups to do stuff. But Jeff, you had some really great applications. So as you moved on to Brilliant Labs, I think a lot of that stuff got left or we've loaned it out to people.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's right. But that's where it should be. And we have equipment, of course, at home that we loan out, and I would love to get it out of my house. So if you have some ideas, then when we get back into school and sessions, we can certainly arrange. And of course, we follow COVID protocols, so social distancing, cleaning, and that sort of thing. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us, even if you do need to borrow a couple of tablets or something like that. We don't generally provide them through the project funding grant, but we have some that we can put on loan if that's something that you also really need, especially with the younger grades, because sometimes we're doing things with Osmo or Ozobots or something like that you really need to have that device. So I have a set that I put aside to loan out. Certainly probably wouldn't be a full class set, but we'd have them working in groups, which is the collaborative part of what we're encouraging anyways.
Yeah, we've got kits for Makey, for microbits, for B-boards. I've got a set of webcams for making stop motion or movie making. Yeah. So we've got lots of things that we can lend out to projects.
Yeah, we have a lot of things, and then of course there's a lot that's currently in your school through the EECD rollout that's happened over the years. So if we can also kind of supplement that too, if you're only had so many Spheros or something, I have a few that I'd be able to loan out so that you could have more depending on what your goal is.
Nice. Well, this has been our chat's been very active in this session, which has been really nice. So but it is hard to have a conversation with a delay here. So we'll just kind of leave these discussion questions as something to think about as you go about your day-to-day. But thank you so much for the active participation from people. There's been some great resources shared as well in the chat if you're here with us. Some different things.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance.
Shared. Yeah, so
it's a really great active resources. And I really appreciate everybody taking their time on a Friday. It's not as beautiful a day here where I am as it was yesterday, but it's nice seeing some familiar faces and a few that I may not have yet met you, but it's nice to virtually meet you. And your active participation in the chat is great because it is a little bit difficult with the delay, but Jeff and I really, really are passionate about what we do every day. And I couldn't ask for a better colleague to work with. So, knowing Jeff for going on 6 or 7 years as when he was in the classroom, and then for him to come and support through Brilliant Labs has been a crucial part in us being able to further develop our reach within Nova Scotia.
Likewise, Sarah, you were awesome support for me when I was teaching, and now to work with you is awesome as well. So
thank you.
People take advantage of your support all across Nova Scotia.
Of course. Should we open it up for any other questions or?
Yeah, if anybody has anything they want to add or throw in, please do throw that in just as we wrap up. But like we said at the beginning, just send us an email or send us a tweet or a DM on Twitter if you do have any questions or you're interested in working with us. Some of the names in the chat I recognize as people that did some of our at-home learning with us this year. So if you'd like to bring us into your classroom, into your physical building next year as well, we would love to keep working with you.
For sure. I see that, Andrew, you mentioned that it'd be nice to have a Scratch Ed meetup, and I just copied that link. I think that's great too. And yesterday we had Stephanie Belfountain who had mentioned that it would be great that some people are not always active on social like Twitter, which is where we do a lot of our stuff. We do have a Facebook page, but I'm more active on Twitter than I am Facebook. But where she had mentioned this person mentioned that we could look at having maybe some Google Meets for those who are not necessarily active on Twitter to share. Like, we really like to connect teachers with other teachers so that you can work together and kind of take this, what we're essentially trying to do and make it sustainable, because you're learning and it may be a little bit of a difficulty to jump off at one point. But like, for example, we have Anne here who really, I think that when we first met, you were just kind of getting into the maker ed and the code stuff, and that was several years ago, I think. And now, I mean, it's amazing to see how far you've come and how all the opportunities and other teachers here too that have offered their students. It's amazing because, like I said, when I get to university and I was not prepared to do that computer science course, it was very daunting. So what you're doing now and laying the groundwork really provides a lot of opportunities for students, and we thank you for that.
I've mentioned a couple of the other sessions at this conference that people should check out, recordings. Another one of our participants, Andrew, also did a session all about microbits. So that's definitely worth checking out as well if you were unfamiliar with it before and you're interested in learning a little bit more about how microbits can be integrated into things that you're doing. In the chat, Cindy shared a little story that's pretty nice. She says, I teach primary, and when I introduced the Bebot to my class, I received parent emails from parents asking where these Bebots were because the children wanted them for Christmas. So they loved the coding so much they wanted to do it at home.
We love that. We love that. And then there was a little girl the other day when we were doing virtual camp. It's always different when you can't be in the classroom, but she came right up to the camera so close that I can really only see her eyes. She goes, I want to be just like you when I grow up, and I want to code things. And she goes, girls could code too. And I was like, of course. And I was, it's just because there is a gender disparity when it comes to within the ICT STEAM career fields. It certainly doesn't exist. The lack of enthusiasm doesn't exist within the schools, but it seems that we still have to do a lot to promote for young women and girls to take it further. So that's something that I personally am quite passionate about, and of course supporting youth who are considered vulnerable or who may not always have access to the same things, so that we make things equitable for all.
All right. Well, looks like we're right on time here, Sarah. We did it.
Perfect.
Perfect.
And we wouldn't have enough to talk about. I could talk, and so could you. So yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for attending this session once more. And I'm going to go back, and for any of those people whose sessions I would have missed over the past couple of days, because I'm helping it with camp, I'm going to certainly take a look and thank you for your participation.
Thanks, everybody. Please do get in touch. We would love to keep working with all of you.